Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Thomas Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry. Today on this show, we're shifting back to the supply side of the industry with Turrentine Wine Brokerage. But before I formally introduce our guest, got to give a sponsor message. Today's episode, it's sponsored by Barrels Ahead. At Barrels Ahead, we work with you to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and connects you with your ideal customers. In short, we help wineries and craft beverage producers unlock their story to unleash their revenue. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. Now, before I introduce our guest, I got to introduce Bianca. Bianca Harmon, our D2C strategist, is joining us again today. How's it going, Bianca?
It's going great, Drew. Really looking forward to this conversation we have today.
Yes, I'm super excited. Today we have Steve Fredricks on the show. Steve is the president of Turrentine Brokerage. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. So, Steve, before we get into all the great stuff you're doing and talk about supply side of the wine industry, how did you get started in this profession?
Well, I was going to UC Davis, thinking I was going to become an engineer, and realized after a couple quarters, calculus was not for me. And I struggled to find what else to do. I was enjoying, other parts of sciences, business, and I knew the wine business was there in that. And I took me a few years to figure out I could create my own major, and I combined fermentation science. I did a little bit of brewing studies along with the enology studies, and combined that with agricultural economics to my own major. Oh, wow. That was much more geared towards science, but also the business of wine. And at that time, there were a lot of young winemakers, 3 deep at most wineries, and I realized production wasn't for me. And so I combined that together.
Did you grow up in a wine family or
I did not. I grew up in Southern California. They were wine enjoyers, being Italian, mainly of Italian descent, although my name doesn't state it. And so just wine was part of the meals and part of family get-togethers. That was really it for me for my wine background before going to Davis.
Amazing. And was it being at Davis that really got you into the wine industry bug?
Pretty much, yeah. That opportunity of going to school there opened the door for me to it.
It has for many. So from there, jumping ahead, so give us a rundown of Turrentine.
Turrentine was started in 1973 by Dan Turrentine, and then continued on. His son started him in 1977. Dan had a long history in the wine business, starting in the 40s after he got out of the service. He was in World War II. And he started with the Wine Institute early on in the days in San Francisco, and worked there, then a state marketing over to the California Wine Advisory Board for a number of years. And then he retired and realized he missed his friends. And so he started just sort of using his contacts of the whole wine business to sort of start brokering and doing deals. And then Bill made it his primary focus in working with him about 4 years later, and created the business. I then started in 1991, and we've grown it since then. Bill retired a number of years ago, and then I stepped in as president. So we're a group of shareholders that are the brokers that run the business.
And you connect growers with wineries. Yeah,
we connect growers with wineries to help them market their grapes. We connect winery to winery transactions for wine in bulk. We work with brokers such as ourselves in the major wine producing countries around the world to create global deals if people need wine from around the world. Help people find producers for maybe a private label strategic brand. And just advise over the long-term trend. So a lot of our customers we've had for a long period of time, continue to work with them, whether that's buying, selling grapes, wine, whatever it is. We've got a long relationship and varied relationship with almost everybody in the California wine business in some way, shape, or form.
And all the wine is juice, correct? It's not bottles? It's all
No, we work with bottled product. We can help people find bottled product at time. It's a very smaller part of our business, whether that's someone bottling a product specifically for a customer, or a strategic brand, say they want their own, Suave from, the Veneto region. We know the producers who can do that, or they need wine in bulk from Chile or Australia or Argentina.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you work with all the logistics of getting that wine into the country?
Most of that business is done by the customers themselves. Okay. Our job's to put buyer and seller together.
Okay. You
negotiate the details. We're not experts in transportation, and everybody's got their own challenges and their own quirks with regards to that. And it's much better for them to have control of that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that's wise, because that is a slippery slope. There's one thing connecting people and being a deal maker, and then another thing is actually getting the grapes over here.
Yeah, getting the wine over, getting everything delivered. There's so much more communication and effort necessary for all those kinds of things, that adding somebody else in the middle of it does not make the process better.
Sure. No, that's important. Now, going back to 91 when you started and up to today, we're looking at a good 30. My math's horrible. Good 31 years.
Yeah.
How is the being a broker and connecting wineries? Granted, the size, the volume has increased, but how has the business evolved over the years?
Everything used to be done by phone and fax.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's done by text and email. And so you talk to people more. You knew where. When I first started, I think we had one cell phone that was portable that would go in the car if someone was going somewhere, but you kind of remembered you knew where the phone booths were, where they were in an air conditioned building, maybe a hotel lobby or whatever, where you could stop and make a few phone calls. I only had to do a little bit of that, but Bill knew all those.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could have lunch more frequently with people. They were less busy. I'll say that they felt less busy because they would take time to go to lunch. There was a lot more of that. Now people are too busy from their cell phone and just everything that's going on to really take that time. But everybody still appreciates the opportunity to spend a little bit extra time over lunch and to talk face to face. Those things are still just as important as always.
It's kind of funny that I started in the wine industry right in about 93 at a wine store, and faxing was the big thing. People would fax in their orders, and now lately you had email, you had phone, but I think texting has become the new faxing.
Yeah,
it just pops right over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People's expectations for the speed of an answer are also different. They didn't expect to have an answer in seconds or minutes. You could take, because you had to call someone, leave a message, people on the road, so their expectations of the speed of service were different.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can't match it anymore. Maybe there needs to be a little bit of a delay for things.
Yes. If I could increase a little bit more friction on the amount of time or the distance at times it takes me to respond to something, that would be great. But talking about
the wine business has become more professional too and grown. There's a lot of different aspects of how it works. A lot more layers at wineries in terms of corporate. And so sometimes decisions take a little bit longer than they used to, just because there's too many other people who have to decide.
Oh, for sure. With all the consolidation that's taken place. For sure. Talking about, so one of the things that really, as I was preparing for this interview, that really kind of piqued my interest is your wine business wheel of fortune and the supply side cycle. I think everyone could learn a lot from that.
It's an aspect that has set us apart from some of our competitors. Bill sort of described this cycles that we go through a number of years ago. I can't remember when we first published it now, but we've revised it and sort of updated the design of it over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes true all the time. Everyone keeps saying, oh, globalization, all these things are going to create cycles. All they've done is change them up a little bit. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, wine is agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's agriculture dominated by a commodity, grapes.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a long time for a vineyard to be established. You to harvest fruit off of it, to make wine and get it out to the consumer. So that long delay means that our response to maybe a change in consumer demand, the growth of a different variety takes a long time to really happen if it's specific to a region and a variety. And it promotes then, a market cycle in which overplanting occurs and the structural supply exceeds demand, but we don't know it for a while because acres go in, then the market cycle, the market indicators of price are there for more acres to go in. And by the time the commodity comes off, the grapes come off, maybe we planted too much. So we'd go to this cycle of oversupply till either maybe some older vineyards that aren't necessary get removed, or sales growth and it catches up with the supply, and then we may go through it again. And there are different ways in which maybe supply can be found to satisfy consumer demand today that may shorten some cycles, may not make them as strong. You could look at some of the last two, Pinot Noir. People looked around the world for, maybe value Pinot Noir came in from Italy and France and Chile, all over Germany. And, but it really didn't substitute for the quality and style people are looking for from California, and really only at the value end. So they were able to come within a year and a half or 2 years of that real need to find that wine and start bringing it in, having wines made in different style from those regions. And then Muscat was the same thing, the growth of Moscato. It's not that there wasn't Moscato already planted all around the world, just used for different sources, even Moscato available in California, but it was made in a different style, had already had a home until it could come out. So we were able to oversupply Moscato pretty quickly. But we did plant some vineyards, but not that many that made it really difficult. And they were planted more in the Central Valley, where growers are more business minded and not so emotional about the vineyard that they planted. And hey, this Muscat's not working. Let's go back to Colombard, or let's craft this over to Chardonnay or something such as that. So those kinds of change the dynamics of it. And it's hard to really predict what's going to happen with consumer demand. Most of the booms of the wine business in terms of a varietal or a style of wine were much more consumer driven. White Zin was an accident, kind of, in terms of put that product together. The switch from white wine consumption in the early 90s to red wine consumptions with the French paradox was not something that anyone saw coming. It came out of the blue. The boom of Pinot Noir was kind of tied to a movie, Sideways, and it's not that. But I can't really think of anything. There's been very few things where it's like, okay, we're going to manufacture this demand by a product. We're going to, go through our market research and product development to hit on a product that's not there. Much more success from the consumer pull than from the producer push.
Oh yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to said a lot of good stuff there so there's the macroeconomic thing of just wine and grapes in general that goes through this supply and demand thing. But then on a more micro level, by varietal and by region, you can have certain supply crunches as well.
Exactly.
From a macro point, where are we right now in the cycle? Grapes in general?
Really can't talk about a macro point because it's so. It doesn't really count for every area and every vineyard. If we hit the number the state says 3.6 million tons, people say, "Oh, we're going to be in shortage." Well, maybe, but where so much of the grapes are grown are in the Central Valley, and so maybe there's a short crop. Maybe there's some analysis that say that 150 to 200,000 tons were lost from the Clarksburg and Lodi region because of the frost that happened earlier this year. Well, that doesn't, so that 150 to 200,000 tons, it doesn't mean that an excess from farther south can't make up that loss, or it has no bearing on Napa Cabernet or Russian River Pinot Noir or Sonoma Chardonnay. It doesn't really matter. So you have to really look at it from a micro. On a macro standpoint, we have two things. Consumer demand still seems to be growing at a good rate at the higher end still, even though it's slowed. Varieties like Sauvignon Blanc at the higher end are growing faster than other varieties. So you have that consumer demand, but then you have consumer demand at less than $10 that isn't doing well. And so those are across all varieties where that's happening. Those two trends are happening. So you have that, so you could say, there's growing sales at one part of it, slowing sales at another part of it. So it's not really a macro point. We don't have an oversupply in general in terms of a real structural oversupply. We have good quantities of, say Northern Interior Lodi Cabernet left over from 21 from new acres in a good crop, 22 with some new acres in a good crop. We've got some opportunities with Central Coast, Monterey, Santa Barbara Pinot Noir from 21 still available, and some grapes that were available that have been available till the end from 22. So there's opportunities there. Doesn't look like there's going to be a good sized crop in Napa Valley of Cabernet. So it's going to be 3 years in a row.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask if that has affected you guys, if you've been busier or in general as a business.
Yes, we have been until recently much busier since I would say, since probably April, May of 2020. We'd started to be busier as the pandemic sort of shut things down, with some opportunistic, but we were in oversupply prior to the pandemic in a lot of things. And wineries were just starting to come out of their excess to need some of the wine that was available. Grape price had come down. So there's a lot of opportunity, and that brought buyers in. And we'd been busy all the way until recently. The bulk market started out fast in it, and it's recently slowed down as we've, gone so long. But the grape brokers have been pretty darn busy. In Napa and Sonoma, any variety that comes available, if there's excess grapes right now, would find multiple buyers for it.
And did the fires and all of that, affect anything on your guys' end?
From which year? Which fires do you mean?
From 2017, 2020.
It always does.
In the Napa region.
It always does affect what happens. In the same way, there's always events that make the growing season difficult, that are quality enhancers, that are quality detractors. Winemakers have figured out over the years how to balance those inventories, how to work with the challenging years to try to improve them. So it's not something that the industry isn't used to dealing with quality challenges. 20 was a separate deal because it was, pretty extensive and very widely publicized. But the technology for wineries to mitigate some of the effects of it is light years ahead of what it was, when you're talking 17 and 18, by the time we got to 20. There were many ways now.
Now, what are some of the technology ways that opened up?
I can't even state. There's just so many different technologies that people have come up with ultrafiltration or polymers that can remove it. There's so much more knowledge of the compounds that cause some of the issues. So they know way more about it and have a much greater confidence in knowing what they're putting in the bottle than they did some of those early fires, and happened maybe in Mendocino and Lake County a few years before that, where we've taken the job, we've reduced it down in this wine, but not understanding some of the long-term chemical reactions that will balance themselves out for some of the issues to come back in the bottle. So, as every day has passed since 2020, with that, we've had fewer and fewer questions from customers, fewer and fewer requests for analysis for any of the last few 2020s that have been available.
Now, with all this evolving and contracting supply and demand, operationally, how do you guys react nimbly and be able to address these?
It's just what we do every day. We challenge ourselves every day, but we're used to the changes in it, because it's not something, maybe for a customer in their region, for their variety, it's a change, but we're working on both sides all the time. Regions that are in excess or varieties in excess, varieties in shortage. So it's not hard for us as a broker to be able to switch back and forth. It's maybe more so the aspect of taking the time to remember our customers haven't caught up with us all the time. They're not on the same page, and being patient enough to work with them with the market information around them to explain why this is happening, why what you thought was going to go on 6 months ago, or when you came to the market 6 months ago, it was this price to sell and why it's half the price now. Well, what happened? Well, all these things happened, nothing stands still. It's evolving all the time. So it's taking the time to explain to them and work with them and give them the information necessary. In today's larger corporate world, they've got to go explain to people who aren't daily involved in it why this is different than what they thought it was. So sometimes it's complex and sometimes it takes a little patience, but we work through it.
And you guys you're always, your website is full of education. One thing that is, talk to me about this collateral value report.
It's just something we do for lenders to help them understand at least a collateral value for wine. It was developed because it then allowed banks to work closer with wineries and really help them out more. And so it's just something we do for lenders from a standpoint of giving them one level of confidence as to what's going on in the market.
And I'm gonna plead ignorance on this. So how explain a little bit more on that.
It's just something we're analyzing the market all the time, understanding the supply available, the demand available, the number of buyers, the volume, the price. And so we're specifying some ranges at which over certain conditions wine will sell as someone could assume they could sell this wine based on these certain conditions. So if a wine
has X number of acres and they've got this amount planted, they can use this report to go to the lenders.
It's more about bulk wine. It's not about land and grape pricing, the aspects of lending for that. It's more about a line of credit, ongoing lending for inventory and for growth with regards to inventory.
Oh, that helps. So they look at inventory in hand and they can use this to help educate the lenders.
Exactly.
So talk to me about some of your other services. I know you've got your strategic brands and
that's really about working with buyers to help figure out what it is they want, what it is, if it's a varietal, it's a region, the size, and matching them with customers that could come up with a brand for them, or if the buyer has their own brand, come up with the wine, the service provider to provide that wine at the price they want if it's there. So it really is about trying to find a niche in the market with regards to what buyers come looking for.
Now, are they looking for somebody looking to purchase a winery, or actually?
This is more about private label brands that would go into a retailer or something such as that, or a distributor may want their own brand to market in their region.
Okay.
It happens all the time. It's just one thing that there are a group of wineries that have these capabilities that may not have their own person out trying to sell it to them. And so we help work with the same way, brokering, bringing buyers that have a need to sellers that have a supply.
Okay. Now on the supply, the topic that no one's been talking about, but everybody's been talking about off air, is the whole supply chain issue. Has the bulk wine issue, has bulk wine and your side of the business, have you seen these same supply chain constraints?
Oh, yeah. It's the excuse of the day. Oh, sorry, supply chain issues. But we have before. I have to give credit to Marissa Lang from Lang Twins Winery in Lodi. Time is escaping me now about how long ago it was, but they were asked her a question. She spoke in the Unified Symposium General Session in Sacramento and mentioned, hey, we have an issue of trucking in this country, the drivers and the trucks, and it's becoming an issue. And then the pandemic only made it worse. So yes, the supply chain issues have caused a lot, be it a negociant winery that might be opportunistic to try to buy some wine in bulk and put a private label brand into a discount retailer. They could make that decision pretty darn late in summer, get glass, find capsules, find corks, cardboard, bottle it, and hit the timeline for the retailer. And now that decision making, it's got to be done in the springtime. Sure. And maybe the wine bargains aren't there at that time. If you're shipping wine, distributors, importers shipping wine from around the world in, you have 6 weeks longer of a lead time to hopefully get it here in time to meet this timeline. Across the globe, glass cost, every cost has gone up, and it's really changed the dynamics. There was a long period of time where the timeline to do something imported was X number of days. And you could guarantee it was always that way. You could get the containers, you could get the trucking, you could get it on a boat. It came, no problem. And now it's like, it doesn't happen. So the business security, just-in-time inventory issues, all those kinds of things are changing how people are planning their business with a much longer timeline, maybe holding more inventory. So it's changing up a lot of how decisions were made in the past. And it seems like it's going to be with us for a while. We're talking about, the rail workers strike.
I was just going to mention that.
I mean,
I woke up to
that's just going to throw another wrench in the system where it still hadn't yet, it's just starting to get a little bit better.
Well, and I think there's going to be a whole new issue too with trucking into California as well. That's going to be
in the long run. It's expensive. It's tough. There's still boats sitting out, offshore in LA, stacked up. I mean, it doesn't happen in the timeline. So I think that, when it comes to growers picking grapes and delivering into wineries, that trucking is an issue, always. And, now with a lot of grapes being ripe earlier because of the heat wave we've been having, a lot more across the state happening all at once. It's not like we haven't seen that before, but it's just a stressful crunch in a time where, labor is tight to really try to do extra.
And as a broker, I mean, it seems like it's a big logistics issue that you have to react to and be that middleman between the two companies. But how do you react to these logistics? The first thing that we've got to do as a broker is remain calm, is try to, calm the situation down. Bill Turrentine had us read this book called Getting to Yes. It was a negotiator. Yes.
And one of their key things was separate the people from the problem to try to, get it down. What's the problem here? It's not a personal issue. It's just, bringing the temperature down, trying to figure out, work with them on alternatives. But in trying times, people are working together. Yes, we're 3 years into the pandemic aspects of stuff. We've got a lot of irritating issues. Everybody has sort of a much shorter fuse, but so far they understand, hey, nobody wants to have dealt with this heat that we've been dealing with the last few weeks. It's not good for the grower. It's not good for the quality of the wine and the winemakers. Nobody's happy about it. And in that instance, I think by and large, the vast majority of people are working together to try to figure out a reasonable solution. And we can't do it today, but we can do it tomorrow. Or, here, let's work together to try to for the benefit of everybody. And that's what we try to keep people doing. If it's, hey, I can't get these grapes in, we were just meeting for lunch yesterday with the winery, and one of their employees, spouses works at another winery. Their hoist broke. They had some grapes that were coming in. They're like, oh, bring them here. We'll crush them and juice them for you and send you out. And like, hey, what do we owe you? That's okay. Just, don't worry about it. We just needed to do this for domestic tranquility between you and your spouse, just a favor. We had the extra capacity. Let's do it. We can send it to you right away. No big deal. That kind of stuff happens a lot.
That sense of like helping each other out and that camaraderie is something I've always loved about the industry.
Yeah.
It's still taking place. And as you mentioned, like trying times can bring people together if you keep the conversation on the right course.
It is. We were one of our younger brokers, William, has had it's been a challenge between a couple of customers. And the first thing he mentioned was, it's great that I had them just last week together, meeting face to face, talking about some other stuff. So when this came up, there was a personal relationship from a face to face meeting together with them. And he goes, it probably made it so much easier because they knew both were trying hard to figure out what is the best resolution to the problem, and we're calm with it, as opposed to, inflaming the tension. And from that, so I thought that was a great observation and a point showing that personal relationship and that face to face does still help out.
Absolutely, more now than ever. I can't tell you the amount of times that email has been misinterpreted, and you can read anything. You constantly try to put your tone into reading the email.
Yeah. And sometimes we've forgotten how long we've been apart for some of these things and not been able to see people. Really, it's like you forget about it. You mentioned, oh wow, I haven't physically seen that guy in 3 years, and I better get out there to see him, kind of thing.
Well, and people love the human interaction, no matter. I mean, at the end of the day, it's always, it's always going to be number one that they want.
Yeah, I talked to a customer, one of our clients yesterday, and he was mentioning that by coincidence, he was down in Chile on vacation, and one of his clients from the UK was there. I mean, he's a California winery. They sell them wine from here, but just so happens that his client was down there in Chile at the same time. And, they're both in Santiago. So they get together and you realize we've been doing business for 3 years. She took over this role for a different person. He goes, I'd never met her face to face, but we'd had a whole bunch of Zoom calls talking over different deals over the 3 years. And it was like we were old friends, and we'd never met in person. So, awesome. Video has provided some level of that kind of person.
I definitely think so. Yeah, video has helped a lot.
It has.
Yeah, you mentioned Chile and international. What percentage of the U.S. wines that you broker go out of the country?
Our expertise is not in most of the volume of wine that goes out for export from California. Is exported by the large wineries. They're working hard to export their branded products around the world. Some of them are working bulk wine, but a lot less bulk goes out. If it is going out, it might be bottled and branded as the winery's brand, just bottled in the UK or Germany or Northern Europe, just to make it cheaper to move around and more sustainable to ship a bladder of 24,000 liters in the container as opposed to only 1,100 cases.
Yeah.
And we're not the low cost producer in the world. California isn't. So a lot of the bulk wine competition was really about the varietal and a price point. And we'll lose out to Chile or Argentina or Spain most every time when it comes to a cost-based producer.
Sure.
And a lot of the bulk wine that comes in now is all same thing, is bulk that's being packaged under a brand in the US, whether that's a 3-liter box wine, 5-liter box wine, or maybe a 750. So, when it comes to spot market stuff, there's a smaller percentage of just bulk wine coming in that has no real, home already.
Now, on a national level, do you work with producers outside of California?
Our focus is mainly on producers within California. Okay. We do work with producers in other states that will buy wine in bulk from us. They may be based in another state, but the vast majority is here now, is here.
Mm-hmm. Some Oregon, Washington, maybe, or
we work with Oregon and Washington producers also.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much as we work in California for sure. Their sizes are smaller, but we do have contacts and we do work with people in both of those regions.
Yeah, so we do a lot of different areas of the United States on this podcast, and I'm always just very enthused to see how many grapes are being planted in Texas and New York and
exactly a lot of wine.
Minnesota.
We're working with customers from Arkansas and so all over the country.
But they're coming to you for California grapes.
They're coming to us for California wine.
Yeah,
and that kind of stuff. More than they're, we're not working with that wine coming here.
Yeah.
Or even reallocating it within Texas.
Yeah, no. The Texas market has changed a lot. some of their laws of 100% Texas and their restrictions on bottling, plus their ongoing water issues in vineyards have made it very difficult for them. But that industry in Texas has grown a lot too. There's a lot that goes on. There's a lot of wine produced in Texas and some good wines being produced down there.
We've had a few on the podcast and I'm impressed, actually.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing in the last 20 years, wine quality around the world has really, through technology, vineyard technology, winemaking technology has really increased a lot. It's great to see that you very rarely get something that is poor quality. We very rarely get wine sent to us that you're thinking, oh, this is a bad problem, where they didn't realize they've got a high VA issue or,
how do you address that when someone's sending you wine that has like a high VA?
A lot of that's with quality. It's really up to the customer, obviously if we're getting notice that it's not commercially acceptable, then we're making sure that the seller knows.
And then the buyer,
most of the time they would disclose it, but the technology is such, the ability for people to make good wine is that it doesn't happen as much. I mean, certain things, wine doesn't have color. The wine's green in character off acidity. I mean, there's not much you can do with that, but
and then the price
should be mitigated themselves. But a lot of it, we're leaving it up to the buyer and seller. Everybody sees something different in a wine. I don't know what they're looking for that they need for their blend. It may be that the extra acidity in this wine works perfect.
It might balance out something else that they've
exactly. You never know. Everybody's got a different blend, and the blend they're putting together evolves over time based on what they've been able to add to it. So their need can change. A wine that didn't work 3 months ago for their blend could work today.
Oh.
And so you never know what will or won't work for somebody.
That's an excellent.
And then depending on the supply available and the demand in the market, people can fluctuate their standards a little bit to be able to accept something. Well, it'll work. It's not optimal, but it will work to be, we'll have to make it work because we need the wine.
Oh, absolutely. So, Steve, personally and professionally, you've been in the business for a while. How do you stay motivated?
Oh, I love what I do. I'm a lucky person. When I started with this business with them in 91, it's kind of what I had by coincidence sort of put together, the wine and the business. But I really like dealing with people. I really like to try to understand the thought process for people. I'm very passionate about the behavioral economics approach to things and in those aspects. So really understanding how people make decisions and why. It's always intrigued me to look at that and to study it and to try to think about it. And we're in the middle. We get to be part of a lot of interesting decisions. We get to be part of the thought process. You're talking to a customer and they're working through their thought process of why they do something and how they do it. And you really see how the variables in decision making may get altered in terms of who you're talking to. You could be talking to two people about the same wine and they're for two different purposes, or they're coming to make a decision and they're valuing the inputs differently to come to the same conclusion. It's always interesting to see what people's reasons are for doing something and how they're justifying it.
Oh yeah.
Justifying doing or not doing and what is important to them. So it's really, it's really interesting to try to do that. And I've been able to, work with a lot of people and known a lot of people for almost, some of these people for almost the whole time I've been doing this.
What a perfect job to be in, to be like a student of human interaction. And
it is. It's really interesting, and I love talking to people about it and seeing what they're thinking and where they're coming from. And that's not being daily involved in brokering is always kind of tough. So I'm like living vicariously through.
So
what did he say? What did he put together in order to do this? Why are they not doing it? And quizzing the brokers on why something's happening or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then that's how you kind of out of the trenches and you got that 30,000 foot view of it. What advice would you give a young broker as he's?
I think that for anybody, getting in, it's you have to be looking at the big picture, and you have to be thinking long term, because you got to always assume positive intent, and you should always be careful of saying something bad about somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You never know who they know.
Mm-hmm.
Around the world, that's the case. You could get an answer from a guy. Oh, I know that guy. We poured at a tasting in this town together, or their wineries. If their wineries are similar, close in the alphabet, you got to think at a trade tasting, they're tasting each other at some time.
Yeah.
You don't know who was a roommate of who in college, worked together wherever, domestically and globally. Oh, I did a harvest, right out of college in the Barossa Valley, and I roomed with the guy from that place. So you just got to be careful about saying something bad about somebody, and realize that it's a long-term business.
Yeah, it's getting people, and then that whole negotiation process. So early this summer, I read the book "Never Split the Difference,"
Mm-hmm.
The Art of Negotiating. As a broker, you kind of want them both to kind of figure out how to split the difference.
Yeah, we try to do that, but sometimes people fall for it. Just splitting the difference is the easy way to get it done. It makes both people happy, on certain things. And there are certain times where that just doesn't work. There's all kinds of different ways to get people to figure out, you just got to figure out what's valuable to them in the transaction. And that's the fun part, figuring out if it's complex. Well, what are the values? What does this person need? Do they need storage? Do they need consistency over time? Do they need payment terms? What is it? They want a better quality. Do they need some kind of flexibility? Whatever that is. And we try to help people figure that out. And our jobs try to help them not go too far. Both buyer and seller. Are you sure you need that amount of wine? Are you sure you're going to grow that fast? We've got 6 other people doing the exact same thing. Are you sure the retailer wants 6 new products or just one, more from one? And it's getting people to try to really, think through what they want to do, especially in those bigger times, especially when there's drastic change, especially when it's really oversupplied or really undersupplied. We're at the worst possible time, in the cycle, to really not do something that you're going to regret.
Sure. Now,
do you have to, speaking of the cycle and the time and stuff, do you have to manage pretty well sometimes too with customers and clients based on the supply that you have versus the demand, and how you prioritize it?
I mean, look, we're subject to what everybody else is. It just depends on the conditions that the buyer and seller have given us. If we have, time, and exclusivity, we can do a better job for both the buyer and seller in that. Sometimes we don't have exclusivity or we don't have time to do it. And then it's really more about speed, but we're trying all the time to make sure that we're not playing favorites. We're letting the market determine who gets what. It's not about me to play favorites if I can avoid it. And some, grapes is different than wine. There's a much more of a relationship between buyer and seller for grapes. Wine people, they're tasting the product. It's not about, oh, I like that winemaker. I like that guy. He's good. It'd be great to have him come out to my vineyard and that. It's no, is he going to pay the price? Is the wine good? Is it at the right price? And, and the buyer and seller never have to talk really. So it's all different kind of things, but we try to, our goal is to try to let the market decide what happens.
I like that.
Very, very good.
Let buyers and sellers decide. Because look, we've got a buyer, you always have to do it the same way every time for a buyer and a seller, because a buyer can become a seller. And if they think you're, playing favorites for the buyer all the time, well, when they're a seller, they're not going to come knocking on your door to have you sell something for them because they think you skew it towards the other side. You have to play it down. You have to try as hard as you can to play it down the middle all of the time, because our customers go back and forth, buy and they sell, a lot of them. And so you have to realize that, you got to do the same thing every time, cover the same ground with them every time, do it in the same way. They have to be able to trust you, which is why we've been, our 20 2023 will be 50 years since we were founded. And there's a lot of customers that I could say 50 years, pretty much be working with that company. Maybe not the same people, but the same company. Mm-hmm. And over my time, I can look at there's some of the same people in places for that time. So been a lot, it's an important aspect of our business that we pride ourselves on.
And I think it's unique to the industry to have such longevity and such long-term relationships. You don't see that in a lot of industries.
Yeah, we're lucky. We're lucky.
We are. So, Steve, where can people find out more about Turrentine Wine Brokerage?
Well, you can give us a call.
And you.
We do answer the phone.
Yeah.
We do have people answer the phone, not automated, because we are a service-based company. You can go on the internet to the website at turrentinebrokerage.com. There's a lot more on there, really about how to use our services, kind of the information that you need to have thought about before you give us a call. We help a lot of people develop new products or find different things they want to do to diversify what they're doing, to think of different ways in which they can achieve their goals of growth. There are many ways to succeed in trying to find what you want to find. And there are a lot of customers for sellers that they don't even think are out there for them, for their products, for their grapes or for their wine. We can always, there's more out there than what people can see on their own. And that's our job to help them find that, whether that's domestically or globally, to try to find, something that helps me out in the long term, that I can maybe start testing out today. I don't have to plant my own vineyard. I can find some grapes or I can find some wine and do something. Or if I've done that, I've already got the vineyard. We might help you find a buyer that values your product. And we've amassed a lot of information about preferences of people, what they look for. And one of the main things we do is know that. So a product comes up, a wine, grapes from a region. Mm-hmm. And from our time, one of us knows, oh yeah, I know this guy's always prized that. They may not be looking for it, but they're really going to value knowing these grapes or this wine are available. Call them and tell them about it. Oh, they're not looking. I know they're not looking, but they've always loved this. They may change their mind. They may want it, even though they don't think they do, or they're not looking for it. So those are the kinds of things we're able to do. And you can find that out, some of that on the website, learn a little bit, and then come to us and we're happy to answer any questions.
That sounds fantastic and very valuable resource. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
It's a real education.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the time.
You have a great day.
All right, you too.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.